What is up, guys? It's Ryan Smetzer, and we are just a couple of weeks in our Celebrating Women series with Ryan Chats with right here on our station social streams and on our podcast apps as well. And we're just having a ton of fun and a great time saluting some of the area women and women outside of our region as well, and what they're doing to really just make moves and just, turn tables and really just have such a great impact on this region and the surrounding area. And I had the honor of bringing on a great friend of mine who is the executive director of Discovery Station, a children's museum here in Hagerstown, Maryland, Brittany Wedd. Brittany, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. It is an honor to have you on. You have an amazing story of how you've gotten to where you are in the leadership role that you have with Discovery Station. Tell us that story.
So I actually started out, I was majoring in astrophysics in college. And unfortunately, I started about 10 years ago, I started this really long battle with tick-borne diseases, and I was unable to finish my college education. So that health crisis kind of landed me working at a gas station to kind of pay for my medical bills. And it was just like my life had completely flipped upside down, right? But fortunately, by the grace of God, one of my friends was actually volunteering at Discovery Station. And I remember he came in one day and he was like, listen, Brittany, there's a position that's getting ready to open up at Discovery Station in Hagerstown. You'll love it. It is a science museum and it's just right up your alley. You should look into working there. So I put in my application, right? And the rest is history. I was very fortunate. B. Marie Byers, the former executive director at Discovery Station, she hired me on the spot. And I'm here 8 years later. I'm now the executive director. I kind of worked my way up through different positions. And it is honestly the best thing that has ever happened to me. It was such a godsend. So I'm excited.
That's awesome. I mean, like you said, you kind of hit that spot where, you were hit with the news of, the tick-borne disease, and it, just kind of flipped things upside down a little bit, but then flipped it right back, right side up for you to have this opportunity for sure. And, like you said, you were going to college, to get a degree in the field of science. And so you kind of had that background kind of driving you a little bit, but, obviously you probably, throughout college weren't thinking with regards of children's education. Right. What kind of was the drive behind that a little bit?
So it was honestly just being immersed in Discovery Station culture, right? So we have the last full year before the pandemic hit, we had over 25,000 visitors from all over the country, right? And because we were a children's museum, obviously there were so many kids coming in, and it's just such a rewarding experience to be able to see these kids, and they're sponges. They soak up all this knowledge and they're so inquisitive about the world. And if I was in astrophysics, I never would have had this opportunity. So it's just so rewarding.
Right on. And, when the pandemic hit, obviously it kind of turned a lot of things upside down, businesses, organizations, nonprofits. And, you guys definitely were hit with the very tough challenge of how do you continue on with the operation of a children's museum when you cannot have the children enter the museum for obvious safety reasons. And there was a lot of pivoting that had to take place. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I don't think anybody really anticipated to be at the forefront of all these historical, life-changing events like the pandemic. So when it started, we had initially closed for 2 weeks, just because we were aware the school system shut down for a little bit. And we had fully anticipated at the end of the 2 weeks, we'd be back open, welcoming kids. And then that 2-week closure turned into a 4-month-long closure due to the state's COVID mitigation efforts. So we pivoted. So we shifted all of our programs and learning efforts to the virtual arena, just like everybody else did. And a lot of that was done initially with our inflatable dinosaur Rex, kind of getting the excitement out there, and then kind of just taking advantage and learning more about the technologies that were available to us. And luckily, our families in the community were really welcoming of that effort, and we did what we could to survive.
Yeah, I think about like, right as the pandemic was starting and everybody was trying to figure out technology like Zoom and
Yeah,
video calling, which had already existed, but it was kind of
right.
just like, well, hey, we're being thrown into having to use it. And now we're at a point where like, we can have this conversation right now through different platforms for streaming and a lot of things that a lot of people invested thousands of dollars into
I
have for
know.
themselves years ago is now something that we have virtually access to a lot of it at this point, which is it's so awesome. And then obviously that then echoes into what you guys are able to do with kind of doing some more, virtual components. And what is something that you learned about yourself with regards to leadership whenever we kind of kicked into pandemic mode back a year ago around this time?
Yeah, it just perseverance. And honestly, my heart goes out to so many of the nonprofit leaders in our community because I don't know of a single nonprofit leader that didn't work less than 80 hours during a week during the pandemic because we had to we were set in survival mode because a lot of us nonprofits have to raise funds to support their organization and their mission. And we're kind of always at a disadvantage with regard to that because there's only so much grant money out there. So when stuff like a pandemic happened, and like with us, we were closed for those 4 months, and all of our revenue streams were closed down. We just literally had to look and hunt and do our best to try to track down grants, track down funding, support our staff and our visitors and our clients. So the pandemic taught me that leadership requires perseverance. It requires to never get up, and it requires to do problem solving in ways that you never anticipated. So.
Yeah. And I mean, the pandemic kind of gave birth to a little bit of a sub-brand branched off of Discovery Station. Obviously Discovery Station being a children's museum, dinosaurs are a pretty big component of the platform and the education that you guys do there. But during the pandemic, you guys launched 2 dinosaur characters over the course of the last several months. And they even had their own Facebook pages. They had their own videos, all sorts of cool stuff. Tell us about just kind of what the thought process was behind those 2 characters.
So at the start of the pandemic and all the uncertainty, everybody was afraid. We were uncertain. We were stressed. And that kind of translated into our children's lives as well. So the children had their lives turned upside down, literally in the split of a day. So we wanted to do our best to kind of breathe hope into the lives of people in the community, to bring humor, and we did that through our inflatable dinosaurs. So we have this inflatable dinosaur named Rex and another inflatable dinosaur named Tyra, and they get into a whole host of crazy antics. And we did a lot of videos that we released on our social media channels. The national news picked it up, and it's just humorous ways to kind of bring happiness into a very dark period of time. And then it was just really well received.
Mm-hmm. That is spectacular. I mean, it was something that I know that just scrolling through Facebook during the pandemic and then just coming upon those kinds of videos, it put a smile on faces. And I think that was the number one, one of the number one priorities as we were in the first couple of months of the pandemic. And it kind of continues to be the same thing, as we're still in isolation, everybody, pulling up those videos and seeing some fun dinosaur content. And so that's so cool just to kind of see hey, how can we pivot in the middle of the pandemic? Let's get the inflatable dinosaurs out.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And honestly, Jess Castle, our operations manager, she was the brainchild for a lot of those videos. And it was fun for us. So it kind of broke up our life of stress and survival as well. So we enjoyed it.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I mean, obviously, the pandemic and navigating that as an organization was, a pretty tough challenge. But what are some other challenges that you have dealt with in your time in leadership? And how have you been able to kind of tackle those challenges?
So definitely, as any nonprofit leader will say, with running an organization, particularly a nonprofit, there's the financial struggle. So you're always trying to raise funds to support your mission. That has always been a big learning experience for me because our cost of operations exceeds $200,000 a year. So we're trying to find grant funding for that. And then just kind of being self-aware because leadership is hard and you want to do your best by everybody involved. So a lot of it is just a growing thing for yourself, learning new skills, learning new ways of interacting with people, interacting with crises like a pandemic, for instance. So.
Yeah, I mean that creativity and resiliency and trying to kind of just keep moving forward is such a big component to that, especially like you said, especially with navigating the last year or so. But obviously, with the last year, it's been kind of a tough time, a crazy time, and probably a tiring time at times, for lack of a better way to put it. What's your best way that you found to kind of unplug, unwind, and kind of shut everything off and get that relaxation time?
So gardening, it's crazy. I was never a gardener growing up or like even in my adult life, but this past year, because a lot of the things that we would typically do, like go to restaurants, go to movies, we weren't able to do that this past year, right? So I spent a lot of time this last year outdoors. My husband he runs a historic site, so that has a lot of gardening involved with it. So I would go out and help him with his gardens at his site. We also like to take our dog hiking a lot. Octavia, she's a husky, and she has a boundless level of energy. So like the pandemic really made her happy because she saw her humans a lot more, and just kind of taking advantage of nature. And the area has so many beautiful sites to go and visit, so many beautiful trails. So we're really lucky to live in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a perfect example. I'm going hiking after this, so works out well. I mean, it's just like taking advantage of those opportunities. And I even remember like this time last year, like walking the canal trail a bunch, and going out to the city park and different locations like that, because it's just so vital to just mental health and keeping everybody's well-being intact is just being out with nature for sure. But I love that gardening. That's such a great way to unwind.
Yeah, we're oh, sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're putting in like a whole field of sunflowers behind our house this year. We've been working on that. So I'm super excited because I love sunflowers.
Yeah, that is awesome. I think I planted some like a couple of days ago, or like put some seeds in. So I don't know. It might be way too early. I don't know. Maybe I got really, really optimistic about the weather and was like, let's just start planting flowers. But who knows?
Right. That's funny.
So the two biggest questions that I've asked, in our last two interviews with this series have been, who are your biggest role models growing up, and what's the best advice you'd ever given? So we'll start with the first one. Who are your biggest role models growing up?
So I don't ever try to hide. My childhood was very traumatic. So I was in and out of foster care a lot. There's a lot of abuse. So with any child who's going through trauma, they like to escape a lot. And I did that through books. Like my heroes growing up were literary characters. So like I admired Harry Potter because he was brave and he persevered through all these different trials in his life. Hermione Granger because she was very intelligent, strong woman. And I wanted to be like that. And I also had obsessions with authors. So I love John Steinbeck because he had such a unique worldview, and he really had his like thumb on the pulse of this country. And I emulated a lot of that in my life, but also like my faith. My faith got me through a lot. And then my adopted mother, because she was just such a strong woman. And I knew that if I could just tap into just a little bit of her strength, I could get through anything in life. And then teachers, because you went to Clear Spring, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like Senorita Smith, Mr. Anjuli, Mrs. Kurtz, they were all phenomenal because they saw things in me that I didn't see, and it helped me to get through a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had my sister on for the first episode of this series, and she had talked about the same exact thing where like a lot of her, elementary school teachers, who are also close family friends of hers were, just such great inspirations to her. And now, she's teaching and she's running an organization that helps out teachers all around the country. And it's just cool to kind of see how like you've got that impact, just keep pushing that impact onto, the next generation, and then the next one and the next one. And that opportunity is just like a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then what's the best advice you've ever given?
So the best advice is I'm a firm believer in hope breathers. And I always try to inspire like the children I mentor and other people to really to acknowledge that everybody is going through something in life, right? And every child is just one caring adult away from being a success story. So you should live your life to try to breathe hope into the lives of others, to inspire them, to give them the strength to go on and do great things in the world. And I have an awesome mentor, Dana Jenkins, who you know from our board of directors. And she really kind of just like guided me as an adult and really tried to help me be a better human being. And I just want to take that and pass it on to as many people as possible. So be a hope breather, change the lives of the people in your community, volunteer, do great things.
I love that. Inspire and pass it on down. That's the best way to look at it. Brittany, thank you again for sitting down to chat with me. Y'all, if you get the chance, if you're in the area for sure, you definitely want to take the opportunity to come by to Discovery Station. They've got some big plans for this year as we start to see the light at the end of this pandemic tunnel. And it's just going to be an awesome 2021. And Brittany, thank you for your leadership and inspiration to others.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It's been fun.
Thank you for listening, whether you're listening out on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Amazon, Alexa, or on Spotify, or right here on our station Facebook pages. Thank you again for listening. God bless. Peace out, Girl Scouts. I'll catch you again coming up next week for another episode of Ryan Chats With.